What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Previews, and I'm back here once again for a comprehensive preview on all the key players on this upcoming slate in the NBA. In these videos, I preview all the key players. We talk about their matchups, we talk about their lines, their form. I tell you what I like and I tell you what I don't, and I do all this to give you all the information that you need to make the best bets possible. Now, I've been reading all the comments, and a lot of you guys are winning. So the one thing I want to encourage you to do is share the picks that you land on after watching this video, because if you guys are winning, I want to see more of it. I want you guys to share it with each other so we can eat, because sometimes I'm not eating. Let's take it from today. I don't hide my losses. So we got hooked on 3 different plays. Jaylen Brown, Brandon Miller, both 1 point short. Darius Garland, 1 3-pointer short. Those 3 bets alone would have been a massive day. We still hit on Jimmy Butler. We still hit on Isaiah Stewart. The only one I actually read wrong, which I deserve a kick in the face for, are the bets that I had on Brandon Ingram. And I can cop that. It's a shit bet. I get it. But we did hit our parlay as well. That was at a plus 194 after Tyrese Maxey got voided. And we also cashed in that first level of the ladder challenge. And that was at plus 119. So I'll keep those things going. Check the pinned comment if you choose to follow. If not, that's all good, baby, because I know you're here for the preview. Now, let's get into it. If your first time watching, take some notes. Let's go. All right, so we've got 8 games to get through on this one. I'm sharing things on Outlier.bet as I usually do. If anybody's interested in trying out Outlier, there's a 7-day free trial in the comments section below and in the video description. So feel free to check it out. I don't mind if you do, because I'm going to take you to the research anyway. But the first game we're looking at is the Orlando Magic versus the Washington Wizards. Now, for the Orlando Magic, Gary Harris and Jonathan Isaac are game time decisions. Not the most important players. I don't think whether they play or not, it impacts anybody else's prop anyway, which is why we see a lot of props available. So let's go through these Orlando Magic players first, and then we'll jump into the Washington Wizards. First one we're looking at is Jalen Suggs. Now, his points prop's at 9.5. It's actually dropped. I've been seeing this at about 10.5 for a lot of his recent games. Now, he does have a good matchup against the Magic, and he's covered this line in 7 out of his last 10 games. In head-to-head matches, he's covered in 3 consecutive games against the Wizards, 22, 15, and 11. All 3 of these games he performed quite well in. So 3 out of his last 5, but in 3 straight. He is playing point guard, but I don't believe he's getting too many assists. His line's at 2.5. It is plus money. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10, but in only 2 of his last 5 against them. He does make the odd 3-pointer, so interested to see how that performs. He's hit his line of 1.5, which is also plus money, in 6 out of his last 10. And against the Washington Wizards, he's cashed this in 3 straight. So very much, if he's going to cash his points line, it looks like he's going to cash his 3-point line against the Wizards. If I had to pick one, I would probably take the 3-point line, because you are getting better odds for that. But at the same time, his points prop, if you do rely on previous form in the last 10, I'd say the points prop's probably the safer option. But yeah, I don't mind the 3-point one, but you'd have to look into it a bit further. He is averaging 4.8 3-point attempts per game. More recently, he has cut back on that, but this is against the Washington Wizards now. They don't make life too difficult for anybody. Who else is there on this team that is worth looking at? Wendell Carter Jr. So he had another strong game against the Charlotte Hornets, I believe. He scored 12 points, and I think he scored a lot of that in the first half. His points prop in this one is 11.5. He has a great matchup here against Washington. So Washington, Charlotte, excellent matchups for centers. Wendell Carter got it done against Charlotte. Can he do it against Washington? Well, we shall see. 5 out of his last 10, but he's only covered in 1 of his last 4 against the Wizards. Rebound prop, that's 7.5 plus money. He's got a great matchup here as well. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, had 9 rebounds against the Charlotte Hornets. Up against Washington, he's covered in 2 out of his last 4. So his last 2 games didn't cover very well, played 26 and 21 minutes. Looking at his last 5 games, he's playing about 27 to 28 minutes per game. So we're not seeing a massive increase in his minutes at all. If I had to pick one, I might even go probably over in his points and rebounds, but yeah, not overly confident in that one. The next player to look through is Paolo Banchero. He was part of our first ladder, took him for 15 points. He scored 22. Points prop in this one is 22.5. The matchup against the Hornets is not a difficult one for him. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. He's covered in his last 2 against Washington, scoring 28 and 24 points. 3 out of his last 7 overall. I don't bet on Banchero to cover his points line very often. He can have some very poor shooting games, so I wouldn't take that with too much confidence. His assist prop, perhaps. His recent form for assists hasn't been great. He's covered in 1 out of his last 6 games, but 5 of his last 10. The matchup is not a terrible one, and in head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 4 out of his last 5 games against the Wizards. So he's got it done against them, but plus money play at 5.5, I still think it's quite difficult. He's a power forward, not really a point forward, even though he does a little bit of that. I wouldn't be overconfident in taking it. His rebound prop, 7.5. It's plus money. Matchup's not bad. 3 of his last 10, and he's covered in 3 out of his last 7 against Washington. He's had some massive rebounding games, but he's had some terrible ones too. So unless you can find more information to really take that prop with confidence, I wouldn't be touching it at all. Franz Wagner, points prop, 18.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. Good matchup against the Wizards, and he's played well against them. Check this out. 7 out of his last 7 games against Washington, Franz has absolutely destroyed them. 7 consecutive games scoring 20-plus points. The line is only 18.5. Now, let's look at this a little bit further. In these games against Washington, plays 34 minutes a game, and he takes on average 15.7 shot attempts. Gets to the line 6 times. All right. If we check that out against his last 10 games, what do we see? He's playing 32 minutes, which is less. He's taking 13.4 shot attempts, which is less. He's taking less free throws, and he's not shooting well from downtown. So, look, despite the form against him in the past, I don't know. I'm still a bit hesitant, but I'd lean to the over, but that's quite an interesting stat. So if you guys have any thoughts on Franz, let me know in the comment section below. I'd be very interested to see what you decide on and the reasons why when it comes to his point prop. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 3.5, 6 out of his last 10, got a good matchup. And against them, he's covered in 4 out of his last 7. His last 2 games, 8 and 9 assists. Looking at his rebound prop, it's 4.5, 4 of his last 7 against the Wizards, 4 consecutive games against the Wizards. If you believe in trends, he's getting 9 exact rebounds. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9's got to be coming up next. In his last 10 games, 5 of his last 10, he's covered 4.5 rebounds. So I don't bet on the Magic much. I might need to start because I'm not winning as much as I wish I could, but that's pretty much them. Looking at these Washington Wizards, there's probably only 3 players worth looking at, and that's Tyus Jones, Kyle Kuzma, and Denny Adria. So Tyus Jones. Now, this guy hurt my feelings last time against Utah. Took his assist prop and he killed him in points. I'd normally only play his points and assists, but what am I going to say? I got influenced by somebody and I only took the assist prop. His points prop is 11.5. It's plus 100. The Orlando Magic make it tough for point guards. 11th fewest points to point guards on the season. Tyus Jones scored 22 points the last time these guys played, covering in 2 out of his last 3. So not a bad pick at all. Looking at his assist prop, his line's at 9.5. It's plus money. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Difficult matchup. And the Magic, he's never gone over with 4, 6, and 6 in his last 3 games. What you might consider maybe a points plus assist prop. I think that's the best way to play Tyus Jones. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. His last game against Orlando had 6 assists and 22 points, where he played 33 minutes. If we look at his last 10 games, he's playing 32 minutes on average. So if the minutes are going to be there, shot attempt should be there too. Doesn't shoot at such a bad clip. And he'll get a few assists as well. I don't think he covers his assist line, but points plus assists, I can definitely see it happening. He's playing enough minutes. He'll get some opportunities there. Don't mind that for Tyus Jones. And next up is Kyle Kuzma. So Kuzma up against Banchero in this one. He's got a difficult matchup to score some points. The Magic allow the 3rd fewest points to power forwards on the season. Kyle Kuzma don't give a fuck about that because he's covered this in 6 of his last 10 and he's covered in 4 of his last 5 against the Magic. He did, however, only score 17 points the last time they played. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 3.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. Tough matchup, but he's covered that in 4 of his last 5 against them. Looking at his rebound prop, the line's at 7.5. He has struggled in that regard. Only 1 of his last 5 against them and 4 out of his last 10. So for Kyle Kuzma, you might look at his points plus assists because I think he's covered this pretty well against the Magic. He's covered this in 4 of his last 5 games, 6 of his last 10, and against Orlando, he's covered this in 4 out of his last 5. He only had 23 in the last game that they played. Obviously, the points prop is what let him down. Did somewhat make up for it with assists, but Kyle Kuzma does have a difficult matchup. But in saying that, I think everybody for the Washington Wizards is going to have a difficult matchup. Outliers helping us out right here, saying Kyle Kuzma has exceeded his 24.5 points plus assist line in 7 out of his last 8 games at home. So let's check that out real quick. This is Kyle Kuzma at home. And as you can see, 7 out of his last 8. He's versus the Warriors, Cavs, 76ers, the Cavs again, Miami, Clippers, Utah. So some of these are difficult matchups. That Clippers one's not an easy matchup. These Cavalier ones, they're not an easy matchup either. And the Golden State Warriors one, that's not an easy matchup. The Philly one, somewhat easy with no Joel Embiid. But yeah, Kyle Kuzma at home, he's been getting it done. Like, I don't mind this. Now, keep in mind, a lot of the bets that I do make, they tend to tick all the boxes, right? They usually, recent form is good, form against the opponent is good, the matchup is good, they're getting the minutes, they're taking the shots, or they're getting the opportunities. They're the types of bets that I take, and I try to tick every single one of those boxes. But if you follow these videos every single night, you notice I do lean on a lot of players, and I normally lean on something like this, and then I still don't take the bet. So my current strategy needs some recalculating, but I'd be foolish just to pass up on a bet like this because the matchup is difficult. Now, one thing to remember about matchups is if the matchup is difficult, you're going to see that's baked into the line anyway. If the matchup's difficult, the points, rebounds, assists, that line will be a little bit lower. If the matchup is good, you normally see those lines increase, right? So just because the matchup is difficult, you shouldn't choose not to play it, is all I'm saying. So I'm going to put Kyle Kuzma down, and I'll look into it a little bit further a little bit later. Not say I'm going to take it, but I'm not going to disregard it just because the matchup is difficult or because I hate Kyle Kuzma. You got to take the emotion out of your betting. Let's have a look at Denny Avdia. His points prop is 14.5. His matchup isn't too bad against the Magic. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10 games, but against the Magic, he's only covered in 2 out of his last 7. His assist prop is 3.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. Against the Magic, 4 of his last 7. And his rebound prop is 8.5. My Lord, that is high. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. And against the Magic, he's covered in 1 out of his last 7. And he's got a very difficult matchup. So this guy is all over the place. He's giving you 15 rebounds or he's giving you 4. So that makes me a little bit anxious. So I won't be touching Denny Avdia. I think just reflecting back on this whole game, I think Tyus Jones points and assists. Tyus Jones points and assists. And Kyle Kuzma points and assists, because those two are the ones who really run this offense. Jordan Poole goes off every now and then, but Kyle Kuzma, Tyus Jones, very high rate of possession. Jesus Christ, what am I trying to say? Very, very high usage rate for those two. So you'd be a fool to ignore their props. I think it's worth looking into. I think one of them will definitely go over. Jumping into the next game, it's the Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Atlanta Hawks. So the Cavs, they just upset the Boston Celtics today. Dean Wade, what a fourth quarter. 7 for 7, 6 from 6 from downtown, 20-plus points. He outscored the Boston Celtics alone in the fourth quarter, which is pretty wild. Cavs, they do have some game time decisions or even a late out. I think Max Strus, Okoro, Evan Mobley, D. Mitch is out. So there's a lot of players yet to be confirmed. So you've only got props for Jared Allen and Darius Garland from the Cavs at the moment. If we just open up the injuries here on Outlier, we'll see Evan Mobley currently listed as out, but there's probably a chance he plays. Max Strus, he's listed as out, but I think that could change closer to the game as well. Limited markets, must I say. So let's have a look at Jared Allen, though. His points prop in this game against Atlanta is 17.5. The matchup against Atlanta is somewhat difficult, and he's had his troubles in the past. He's covered in 1 of his last 5 against Atlanta. Looking at his assist prop, and I'm only looking at this because Donovan Mitchell's not here. Sometimes you can rack these up real quick. 5 out of his last 10, never hit it against the Hawks. Rebound-wise, he's covered in 12. Sorry, his line is at 12.5. He's covered in 1 out of his last 10 games. Now, this is crazy. And against the Hawks, he's covered in 1 out of his last 5 games. So I definitely lean to the under on this one. The odds aren't going to be great, but I'm not feeling Jared Allen unless we know who's in or who's out. If Mobley's not there, then he's got to do something, right? So I'd be very hesitant to bet on any Cleveland players until we know what the lineup looks like. Darius Garland, he does have a great matchup against the Hawks in this one. His line's at 23.5, and this is what I was talking about. When the matchup is good, the lines are going to be higher. He does not deserve to have a line at 23.5 based on the way that he's been playing. Looking at his last 20 games, he's covered this line 3 times, right? So if you didn't know anything about basketball or the impact of matchups and injuries, you'd look at this graph and you say, no, he can't do it. You'd bet the under. But you have to consider the lineup changes and the good matchup in this one. But I would honestly wait to see who is playing and who isn't. So In head-to-head matchups against Atlanta, he's covered in 3 out of his last 4. Looking at his assist prop, at 7.5, he's covered in 4 out of his last 10. He's got a great matchup, and he's covered in 2 out of his last 4 against the Hawks. 3 points. Took his 3-point line today. We needed 4 3-pointers. He finished on 3. He shot 3 from 8. Look, if partly I've made Dean Wade. If Dean Wade didn't score so many points in the fourth quarter, Darius Garland might have had more opportunities there. But Atlanta Hawks, they allow the most 3-pointers made to point guards on the season. Darius Garland, this was a plus money play today if he took his over 3.5. If you look at the 3.5 in this game, it is a plus money play as well. So I don't mind that. The opportunities are going to be there. And we know that Donovan Mitchell's not going to be there. Chances more players are going to be out. More of the offensive load falls on Darius Garland. But another play you might consider is his points plus assists. If you have outlier, what you would do is then go with games with that player, do some research to figure out, all right, so how does he go when Donovan Mitchell and Mobley aren't there? Right? You would see that he's got no data on that because Garland's the one who's been missing games, not these two. But play around with the filters, do it one by one, yada, 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 until you figure it out. But look, all I'm going to say is Garland's got an excellent matchup for points and an excellent matchup for assists against this Atlanta Hawks team. He's covered this points plus assist line in 3 out of his last 4 games against Atlanta. And I'm pretty sure Donovan Mitchell would have been playing in a lot of these games too. So I don't mind that for Darius Garland. Points plus assists. I'm actually going to put that down. I'm going to look into that a little bit further. Garland, points plus assists. Let's go. But I'll look into it, but I'm not going to make any final decisions until I know who's playing. Looking at these Atlanta Hawks, you've got to start with DeJounte Murray. He's been playing pretty well. He's just been a little bit inconsistent on the point side of things. Well, when I say inconsistent, he hasn't been getting to his points line, but he's still been scoring some points. So his line in this one is 22.5. Against the Cavs, the matchup is somewhat difficult. He has covered this in 4 out of his last 10 games, and against the Cavs, he's covered in 3 out of his last 6. His assist prop, he's at 7.5, 4 out of his last 10. Tough matchup, and he's covered in 1 of his last 6 against them. But obviously, you got to keep in mind Trae Young, right? His rebound prop, that was part of our ladder challenge today. I think we needed 4 rebounds, and he got 9, so he got that quite easily against the Knicks. But he's covered in 7 out of his last 10 games, plus money. Matchup is somewhat difficult against Cleveland, and against them, he's covered in 2 of his last 6. 2 of those games, he did have 9 rebounds. So with DeJounte Murray, best thing to do is just check to see how does he go without Trae Young. Trae Young's, his rebound prop, he's covered in 6 of his last 7 games without Trae Young. His assist prop, without Trigger Trae, line's at 7.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10 games with no Trae Young in the lineup. And if we look at his points prop, Trae Young, we can see he's covered in 5 of his last 10 without Trae. So quite inconsistent, but sometimes if you have a look at the PRA, it gets a little bit better. So his PRA, 6 out of his last 10 games he's covered. But if we look at his last 10 games without Trae Young, we can see that DeJounte Murray has covered his PRA in 8 out of his last 10 games. So he can contribute from all levels. His points, rebounds, plus assists. So that's a pretty juicy prop already. Atlanta at home as well. So if you want to get a bit horny with it, we go home games without Trae Young. DeJounte Murray's covered in 4 out of his last 6. A lot of these games he cleared quite easily. The games he went under, Milwaukee, looks like a terrible game, and against Utah, and that was probably a week ago. And the Hawks blew them out, so probably didn't play enough minutes. 17 points, 11 assists, and 4 rebounds. He only played 31 minutes in that game. So, yeah, look, DeJounte Murray PRA is looking good right about now, but once again, I'll look into that a little bit further. But the PRA is the one that I'd play if I was looking at DeJounte Murray. I wouldn't go any of his single props. Who else is there? Jalen Johnson. We know that he can deliver. He had a pretty good scoring game today, 26 points. His matchup against the Cavs is a difficult one, but again, we don't know if Evan Mobley's going to be there or not. Might be Dean Wade. So Jalen Johnson's covered in 5 of his last 10 games. 20 points the last time he versed Cleveland. And in that particular game, the Hawks still lost by 21 points. So Hawks got blown out. Jalen Johnson still scored 20. That's positive. His assist props at 3.5. He had 7 assists today against the Knicks. He's capable of some monster games, but he's also capable of doing nothing. 4 assists the last time he versus the Cavs. And his rebound prop, 9.5. That's quite high. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. Tough matchup, and he's gone under in all 3 games against the Cavs. But this will obviously be influenced by Evan Mobley if he's there. The line in this game is 2.5, so I don't expect there to be a blowout. So you probably could expect Jalen Johnson to get a lot of minutes in this. Similar to DeJounte Murray, he can really fill up the stat sheet. You're not going to find him consistently doing one thing. And if you look at his PRA, what this tells us is that he's inconsistent as hell. That's what it tells me. 4 out of his last 10 games, last game against the Cavs, he had 31 PRA. So bookmakers setting the line based off his previous performance, perhaps, because it's going to be a sweat-free bet. It's either you know you're going to lose or you're going to know you're going to win from Jalen Johnson. So I can't get a good read on that. Who else is there? Clint Capella. Maybe he could have a big game here. We're just going to jump straight to his points plus rebounds. So in terms of the matchup, he's got an easier matchup for rebounds than he does for points. His line is 19.5 for his points and rebounds. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10 games. But up against the Cavs, he's only covered in 2 out of his last 5. So not feeling that one for Clint. Let's have a look at Bogdanovic, and we'll only look at his 3-point prop here. So his 3-point prop is at 2.5. The matchup is somewhat difficult, but it's plus money, and he's hit it in 6 of his last 10. Head-to-head matches, he's hit in 2 out of his last 4 against Cleveland. 3 out of the 4 games were home games as well, but he only covered in 1 of those. If we just want to look at his home games alone, last 10 home games, he's covered in 8 of his last 10. If we look at his home games without Trae Young, Bogdanovic has covered this line in 4 straight games at home without Trae Young. So that could be something that you're interested in. Other than that, nothing really intriguing me about this game. So let's jump into the next one. It's the Clippers versus the Houston Rockets. Everybody's pretty much healthy, ready to go. Obviously, Westbrook is still out of this one, but we've got a lot of players to get through. So let's start with these Clippers. Where's my man James Harden? Here he is. His points prop is at 17.5. The matchup is probably on the difficult side, but won't be too difficult for James. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. He scored 24 points the last time he versus the Houston Rockets in November. So he's been playing quite well, but he had a great matchup against the Bucks and the Wizards, right? So really taking advantage of some good matchups there. The Rockets are a better defensive team than both of those guys, but yeah, I'd probably lean to the over in his points if I had to. Looking at his assists, it's at 8.5. He's got a difficult matchup. The Rockets allow the fewest assists to point guards in the league. James Harden had 7 assists the last time these guys played. Looking at his rebound prop, that's at 5.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, but he's gone under in 5 straight. Matchup is difficult, but he had 9 rebounds the last time he played the Rockets. If you're interested in a 3-point prop for James Harden, the line's at 2.5. It's pretty juiced at -160, and he's hitting 5 of his last 10 and only made 2 3-pointers against the Rockets. Who else have we got here? Terrence Mann. Nah, I bet on Terrence Mann last time. Ty Lue didn't play him in the 4th quarter, and I got very upset. So we're not looking at that. Let's look at Paul George. So PG's got a difficult matchup. The Rockets allow the 2nd fewest points to small forwards. Dylan Brooks, most likely to defend Paul George, I think, in this one. PG's covered in 4 out of his last 10 games. Scored 29 points against the Milwaukee Bucks. And looking at head-to-head matchups, PG, he's covered his line in 4 consecutive games against the Rockets. That's pretty positive. Assist props at 3.5. It's plus money. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. The matchup is tough, and he's covered in 3 of his last 4 against the Rockets. Rebound-wise, line's at 5.5. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10 games, and he's covered in 3 out of his last 4 against Houston. So, but I think when you're looking at these Houston stats, the most recent one's the main one because his production has dropped off this year compared to last. His 3-point prop is 3.5 in this one. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10 and 2 out of his last 4. So he's had 4 3-pointers against the Houston Rockets the last time they played. But PG, quite a strong game. Just checking his last 20 games to see whether he's had back-to-back games. And it wasn't done since mid-January where Paul George put together back-to-back scoring performances. But I'm not really overly aroused by anything PG related in this one. Kawhi Leonard, his points prop, 25.5. He's got a good matchup here against Houston. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10 and he scored 26 and 30 points in his last 2 games against the Rockets. This game where he scored 26 was this season. So PG covered that last time, but I'd still be a little bit hesitant to back him. His assist prop is at 3.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. He's got a great matchup in this one. Had 2 assists the last time he versus the Rockets, though. And his rebound prop, 6.5. 4 out of his last 10 games. Had 8 rebounds the last time he played the Rockets. So the matchup is a good one. But what can you look at for Kawhi Leonard? Maybe his PRA. That's at 35.5. He's only covered that in 4 of his last 10, but he has a good matchup for every single prop category. And against Houston, he has covered it the last 2 times that he played them. So, yeah, look, I'd probably lean the over. The line for this one is 6.5 in favor of the Clippers, though. Clippers are on the road, so Houston might be able to hang with them. So I doubt there's a blowout. Chance that Kawhi Leonard gets a little bit more action and more game time. Also, Clippers might be looking for redemption after losing to the Bucks. So I don't mind the PRA there for Kawhi Leonard. I'm just not feeling it, right? So let's have a look at some of these Houston Rockets. Maybe there's something in here that gets me giddy. Let's look at Fred VanVleet. Now, he's been scoring the ball quite well lately. He's covered this points line in 5 out of his last 6 games. The line's at 16.5. Against the Clippers, the matchup's not good nor bad, but Fred VanVleet scored 19 points the last time these guys played. Jumping into his assist prop at 7.5, he's covered in his last 10, had 11 and 10 assists, and he had 10 assists the last time he versed the Clippers. The matchup is somewhat difficult, but Fred's got it done before. Rebounds, lines at 3.5, 4 of his last 10 he's covered, had 8 rebounds against the Clippers last time. My God, he hit them with everything. Looking at his 3-point prop, it's at 3.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. The matchup is difficult, but he had 5 3-pointers against the Clippers. So this guy absolutely dismantled the Clippers last time they played. Let's have a look at Fred's PRA. He's covered in only 4 of his last 10, but his last 3 games have been absolutely solid. Against the Clippers, he had a 37 PRA. We only need 28 in this game. Based on his recent form, it's only 3 games. 2 games against Phoenix, 1 game against the Spurs. The Clippers are a slightly more difficult matchup, but we know one thing for sure. Fred's going to get minutes, right? He's going to get minutes and he's going to take some shots. So he's averaging almost 13 shot attempts per game, almost 8 3-pointers per game, getting to the line twice. He's also getting some boards as well. So Fred VanVleet, PRA, how much stock do you put in these last 3 games? So that's the ultimate question, but I don't know, I might put it down on my short list and investigate that a little bit further. But Fred, he's done very well against the Clippers in that last game. Can he do it again? I do not know. Jalen Green, let's have a look at Jalen Green. His points prop, 19.5. He's been playing quite well. His last 3 games, very similar to Fred, been getting busy. He's covered in 3 straight. The matchup's not a difficult one against the Clippers. 4 out of his last 10 he's covered. He scored 20 points the last time he versed the Clippers, but the prior 2 games to that, he also scored 20-plus points. So Jalen Green, some good form there. Looking at his assist prop, 3.5. No, we're not touching his assist or his rebound prop because those suck. 3-pointers, though. 3 out of his last 10. I don't know how he can be capable of 7 and 6 and then struggle after that. This is how he goes against the Clippers. I'm not feeling that. If I had to bet Jalen Green, it would have to be his points. Form against the opponent and very recent form is pretty good. Jabari Smith Jr. Let's have a quick look at this fella. Rebound-wise is what I want to look for because points-wise he's not too good at. But his rebounds, amazing rebounding form, and then doing nothing. So the matchup against the Clippers is a good one. He's covered in 6 of his last 10, but he's gone under in 5 consecutive games against the Los Angeles Clippers. So Jabari Smith Jr. fans, beware before you bet on him. Alperen Sengun, points props 21.5, scored 45 against the Spurs, but what centers don't score against the Spurs? He's covered in 2 of his last 10, has a tough matchup. He's covered in 2 of his last 5 against the Clippers. His assist props at 3.5, 5 out of his last 10 games. He's gone over in his last 2 against the Clippers as well. And looking at his rebound prop, that's 9.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10, but 5 of his last 6, really. The matchup is difficult. And against the Clippers, he's only covered in 1 out of his last 5. So Sengun, he's not getting busy with me either. So I think from that game, probably Fred VanVleet has my interest. James Harden points, perhaps. Jalen Green points as well. Jumping into the next one, it's a Memphis Grizzlies versus Philadelphia 76ers. But I think Tyrese Maxey is out for this game. The Grizzlies are playing, so I'm assuming half of their team is out. The ones who aren't out, probably game time decisions. Jaren Jackson Jr., actually, he's a game time decision in this one. So there's not too many markets available right now. Let's have a look at Jaren Jackson Jr. See what's wrong with him first. Let's have a look. Right quad soreness. Poor fella. His points prop, 24.5. He's got a good matchup against the 76ers if he plays. 6 out of his last 10 games. He's gone under in his last 2 against Philly. His 3-point prop's the only other one I'd look at. So he's hit 2 3-pointers or more in 8 of his last 10 games. Minus 120. The matchup's not too bad, but he's gotten 2 and 1 3-pointer against the 76ers in the past. Jaren Jackson Jr., I'm not feeling you. Kyle Lowry, that's one that I could probably muck around with. So starting point guard now. Tyrese Maxey, if he is out for this one, we're going to see Kyle Lowry get more opportunities like he did against Brooklyn today. So he's only covered in 2 of his last 10, but I wouldn't worry about that. Let's look at these last 3 games. So these last 3 games, he's playing 36, 33, and 36 minutes. So the last 3 games is what we're really focusing on in here. The matchup against Memphis is a good one when it comes to scoring. So he's covered in 2 of his last 3. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 5.5. He's covered that in 2 of his last 3. And looking at his rebound prop, which is 3.5, he's covered in 2 of his last 3. The matchup is a great one for rebounds. So for someone like Kyle Lowry, based on his 3-game form, I'd probably look at his PRA. It's over 22.5. He's covered that in only 1 of his last 3 games, but he's got a pretty easy matchup. I know the Dallas one is not an easy matchup for point guards. The Brooklyn one is a good matchup for points, difficult one for assists. And the Hornets one, it's not that easy. He made it look easy, but he's got a good matchup for points, rebounds, and assists here, Kyle Lowry. And if Tyrese Maxey's not there, so let me check who else might be out here. Tyrese Maxey, still got a concussion. D'Anthony Melton, I think he only came back for 1 or 2 games before suffering from more back spasms. But think about the depth chart. They don't really have too much. So Kyle Lowry, probably going to see 36 to 37 minutes. Again, I think my only worry is probably the back-to-back. At his age, back-to-back, how many minutes is he going to play? I feel they're going to go deep into the bench. So Kyle Lowry, I'll probably do some research on him to see what he said post-game and stuff like that. So Kyle Lowry, PRA, I don't mind that. I'll do a dive. If it's plus money, I'll probably take it. But let me know what you guys think. I'm just running off vibe at the moment. It's not just numbers. Tobias Harris, God. Can you guys let me know in the comment section? Will you forgive me if I just never look at Tobias Harris props again? Because I know I'm never going to bet on this guy. His bloody form's all over the place. Look at this. Had games where he scored 7 and 8 points. He's had games where he scored 31. What pisses me off is he plays a similar number of minutes every single night. He just goes up and down like a yo-yo. So there's his points. There's his rebounds. There's his assists. Good luck finding something. That's what I'll say about Tobias Harris. But you just let me know if there's any Tobias Harris fans in there. If someone bets on him, I can keep looking at these. But 2 players that I always look at, though. Buddy Hield, Vince Williams Jr. And I look at their points and their assists. So we'll do the same thing here. Buddy Hield, he's gone under in 6 consecutive games now, and this points for up to 13.5. Difficult matchup, whether he's playing the 2 or the 3. I do not know if Maxey's not playing. He'll probably be playing the 2, and they'll probably be in the starting lineup, I'd imagine. Buddy Hield gone under in 6 straight, 4 of his last 10. His assist, though, lines moved up to 4.5. This was usually sitting at 3.5, and he would have covered that in 9 of his last 10. It's now moved up to 4.5. Obviously, if there's no depth in the backcourt, Buddy Hield's going to have more playmaking opportunities. I don't love it, if I'm going to be honest with you. Looking at his 3-point prop, it is at 2.5. The Grizzlies do allow the second fewest 3-pointers made to shooting guards, but he's covered this in 8 of his last 10. So questionable there on Buddy Hield. Vince Williams Jr. We'll look at the same thing. Points line is at 13.5. Vince Williams is a 2 or a 3, but he's playing point forward, so difficult to categorize him here. But he's covered this in 3 out of his last 10 games, yet to versus 76ers. Looking at his assist prop, it's 5.5. It's juiced to the gills. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. But the matchup somewhat difficult against Philly. But looking at his 3-point prop, now he's not a great 3-point shooter, right? He's shooting them at 28%. Problem is, not the problem. The good thing is, some games he takes a lot of 3-pointers, plus money if he makes 2. In terms of the Philadelphia 76ers, they allow the sixth fewest three-pointers made across the league. So I wouldn't take that with any confidence. But yeah, so from this game, definitely Kyle Lowry, my favorite pick so far. I'll have to research it a bit further because my risk is old man on a back-to-back. That's tough. I think Kyle Lowry is older than me, right? And I play basketball twice a week. And there's no way in hell that I'm playing back-to-back. Let me tell you. And I'm not playing as hard as Kyle Lowry against the athletes. We have a very similar shaped body, I'm not going to lie. But ain't no way in hell I'm playing a back-to-back. So I'll look into that a little bit further. But let's jump into the next game. We're looking at the Chicago Bulls versus the Utah Jazz in this one. Now, Keontae George, he's a game time decision. He actually killed our bet last time, but he's vomiting all over the place and only playing 6 minutes. So he's a game time decision. The Utah Jazz missing quite a few players. So Taylor Hendricks, Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, and they're all out as well. So just looking at the starting five, I already know I'll probably only look at Colin Sexton and John Collins. And then from the Bulls, we'll look at Kobe White, Desonmu, DeRozan, and Vucevic. So start with John Collins, because I've been betting on this guy with a lot of success this year. Let's see what this delivers on. Points prop is at 16.5. Matchup with the Bulls, somewhat difficult though. He's covered in 6 of his last 10, scored 14 points against the Bulls last time. Looking at his rebound prop, Mr. Collins is at 10.5, so that's skyrocketing now. 15 rebounds against the Wizards. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, but only had 6 rebounds against the Chicago Bulls last time. I hate to say it, but I'd probably be leaning the under in John Collins' points plus rebounds. His lines are a little bit higher than they normally are, and I understand the Jazz are missing some players, but that only means that there's probably a higher chance that they get blown out or lose, and if they're losing, it might be harder for him to rack up stats. Last time he played them, he played 28 minutes. He had 20 points plus rebounds. His line's at 26.5. His last 10, he's covered this in 6 of his last 10, but he's playing about 30 minutes a night on average. So looking at the games where he's done well, Washington, easy matchup. Miami was a difficult one. Orlando's somewhat difficult, but he's done well. Spurs is easy. Hornets are easy. Warriors are easy. Lakers is a tough matchup for him. The Warriors, that's an easy matchup for him. And the Phoenix Suns, that's actually a tough matchup. I don't know if Nurkic played in that game. So I'd lean to the under. Not going to bet it, though, because I do like John Collins. Having a look at Colin Sexton, his points prop is at 21.5. The Bulls' 10th fewest points of shooting guards on the season, covering in 4 of his last 10 games, and he's gone under in 2 games against the Bulls. His assist prop is at 5.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, gone over in 1 of 2 against the Bulls. If you want to look at Sexton's three-pointers, the line is, it's a push if you get it for 2. He's had 2 3-pointers made in, 8 of his last 10. But if you want to play 1.5, you're getting minus 180, which isn't great. 2.5, you're getting plus money, and he's hit at a 50% rate. The Bulls do allow a lot of 3-pointers made to shooting guards, but if you watch them play, Colin Sexton does play a lot of the point guard position. I probably have a feeling that someone like Clarkson could have a big game here off the bench against the Bulls. Not really feeling Sexton or John Collins. Keontae George, vomit all over the place. I'm not looking at you, my boy, so let's get into the Bulls. Kobe White, his points prop, 23.5. He's covered in 2 out of his last 10. Matchup is somewhat difficult against the Jazz. He's gone under in 3 consecutive games against them, but he did just score 37 against the Sacramento Kings. His assist prop, 5.5. He's got a great matchup against the Jazz. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10, but he's only covered in 1 of 3 games against Utah. His rebounds, 5.5, 1 out of 3 against Utah, and 4 out of his last 10 overall. Like this, he can deliver with all 3 props, really. You can look at his points, rebounds, and assists, and he's hit that in 2 of his last 10, but a lot of that is because of his inconsistency scoring the ball. So you might look at his rebounds plus assists. That's at 11.5. It's plus money. Good matchup, but only covering in 3 of his last 10, and he's gone under in every single game against Utah. So that scares me off, but I also don't think it really should, right? I'm just struggling with a little bit of logic right now, because obviously I'm betting by making sure that everything ticks all the boxes. And even though it ticks all the boxes, it still fucking loses half the time anyway. So that's a bit frustrating. A lot of these players who have never hit their lines against a certain team or whatever, you'd be surprised how often they do finally hit. So I don't think that's a good enough reason to avoid something just because they've struggled against a certain team. Ayo Desonmu, his points prop is at 14.5. Against Utah, somewhat difficult matchup, but he's covered in 6 out of his last 10. He's gone under in every game against Utah in the past. But his recent form has been great. He's playing a lot of minutes. He's taking a very consistent volume of shots. He's shooting 3-pointers at 49% from the field. He doesn't get to the free throw line much at all, so but I don't mind the way that he has been playing lately. I have been staying close to Bulls games because I have been betting on DeMar DeRozan as a late. And the one thing that frustrates me is DeMar DeRozan doesn't score in the first half. Desonmu does score a lot of them. So out of curiosity, what does his first quarter props look like? See, check that out. First quarter prop is at 4.5. It's plus 122. He's covered that in 5 out of his last 6 games. Pretty wild. So I'm not saying to take that, but I just find that interesting. His assist lines at 4.5. He's covered that in 6 of his last 10. He's covered in 5 of his last 6. That should be somewhat difficult against Utah, but his recent form is promising. His rebound prop is at 3.5. He's covered that in 4 out of his last 10. He's getting close to it though, but not always covering it. So delivering with all 3 props. So you might want to look at his PRA. And his PRA, he's covered in 5 out of his last 6 games. The game he went under was against the Detroit Pistons. Low scoring game. He still played 38 minutes in that one. Shot the ball 14 times, but he only shot 29% from the field. He's shooting on average 52% over his last 10, 49% from 3. And in that game against Detroit, he was 0 for 5, which is a complete rarity. So if he does shoot his normal and he makes 2 of those, it's an extra 6 points, taking it up to 26. And he covers this PRA. So I think this is going to be a good one. It depends on the pace, though, right? The Bulls play at the second slowest pace in the league. The Jazz, they play at the 8th fastest pace. This game is being played in Utah, so maybe Utah can control the tempo here. And if they do, a lot of opportunities for Desonmu to get up and down. I think I might have talked myself into taking this, but I'll research just a little bit further. Desonmu PRA, I don't hate it. Who else do we have to look through here? Everyone. Let's have a look at DeMar DeRozan. So I've been betting on his points plus assists for a while now. His points props at 24.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. DeMar DeRozan has an easy matchup in this game. Against Utah, he's covered in 2 out of his last 3. Looking at his assists, it's 4.5, and he's covered in 6 of his last 10, and he's covered in 2 of his last 3 against Utah. Looking at his points plus assists, 2 out of his last 3 against Utah, 21 points and 4 assists the last time they played, and the Bulls blew them out. He only played 30 minutes. Looking at his last 5 games, DeMar DeRozan is playing almost 40 minutes a night. His last 10, he's covered in 7 out of his last 10 games. If you want to really break it down, we can go his last 10 games on the road and check that out. He's covered his points plus assist line in 6 consecutive games, and that's really been driven by his scoring. So 6 out of his last 10, and he does have a good matchup for points and assists, whether you're looking at small forwards or power forwards. Damn, do I get on DeRozan again? DeRozan, like, I get very frustrated because he does a lot of work at the end of the game, but I don't know. Is this too good to be true? Like, he's covered it last time against Utah on the road, 2022, of course. He did only have 25 last time, but again, only 29 minutes. He'll play an extra 10 minutes, and in that extra 10 minutes, can he get 5 points or assists? Yeah, I certainly hope so. So that's definitely what I'm leaning on. Let's have a look at Nikola Vucevic. He's got the size advantage in this one. Let's see what the numbers say. Points prop, he's covered in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup isn't a bad one against Utah. Head-to-head matches, he's gone under in 3 straight. So a little bit hesitant there. His rebound props at 12.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. The matchup is a hard one, and he's gone under in 2 out of his last 3 against Utah. So Vucevic, I am not feeling, but Desonmu, DeMar DeRozan, you got my attention. We've got 3 more games to go. The next one is the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Portland Trailblazers. And of course, the Portland Trailblazers have half their team out or game time decisions. The ones we're really waiting on is Kamara and Jeremy Grant. They're game time decisions, but so is DeAndre Ayton. So is Matisse Thybulle as well. So you've only got props on the OKC Thunder here. And the line is 13 points in this game. And I'm telling you now, I'm probably not going to bet on this game. The reason being, very high likelihood of a blowout, especially if these guys do not play. OKC can blow them out, and then suddenly no one hits their props, right? So we'll go through the props anyway, because I'm just interested to see what they look like. So SGA, his point line is 30.5. The matchup is somewhat difficult against Portland, but is it really? He's covered in 7 out of his last 10, and he's covered in 5 of his last 7 games against Portland. But what would be interesting to see is how many of these games were a blowout and what did he score? So the last time they played, OKC only won by 2 points. He scored 33. When Portland blew them out by 60 points, he scored 31 points. So he's still somewhat impressive in that game. So SGA can get after it in a blowout. Looking at his assists, the line's at 6.5. He covered in 5 of his last 10, but the matchup is pretty good. He had 10 assists the last time they played Portland. He only had 4 assists in the blowout. That just highlights the risk. And his rebound prop is also 6.5. He's gone under his rebound prop in all the games against Portland. In his last 10, 4 out of his last 10 he's covered it in. So what I would probably be looking at here is his PRA. He's covered in only 4 of his last 10, and he's covered in 2 of 7 against Portland. In those games, they were close games and somewhat high-scoring games. But, yeah, look, like I said, I'm not betting on this fucking game. The blowout could happen or it could not, right? So, but I think if I know that there's a chance that a blowout's going to happen, would you really bet on it? The only time I'm going to bet on it is if I'm taking the under, and I'm still not sure. Jalen Williams, his points prop, 18.5. He's covered in 6 of his last 10. The matchup with the Blazers isn't too bad. He's covered in 3 straight games against them, so blowout or not, Jalen Williams has gotten busy. Looking at his assist prop, 4.5, 6 out of his last 10, but only 1 of 6 against the Blazers. And his rebound prop, 4.5 as well. 3 out of his last 6 against the Blazers and 3 out of his last 10 overall. So, yeah, I'm not feeling that. I think Chet Holmgren might be worth looking at, though. The line's at 15.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Matchup against the Blazers is a good one. They allow a lot of points as centers. Head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 2 out of his last 3. Funnily enough, the game he scored 8 points wasn't even the blowout game. He scored 19 points in the blowout game, and he played only 20 minutes. Looking at Chet's assists, the line's at 2.5, 3 of his last 10, covered in his last 2 against Portland. I think his 3-point prop might be interesting. Hasn't got it done against Portland in the past. In his last 10, he's covered in 5 of those games. Rebound-wise, line's at 9.5. 4 out of his last 10, and he's covered in 1 of 3 against Portland. Had 10 rebounds in the game where he played 32 minutes. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm not really liking anything within this game, so I'm going to jump into the next one. But let me know. If you found some value in this one, put it in the comment section. Just explain to me the reasons why, because I'm struggling to see it. Next game is the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Golden State Warriors. Jay Crowder, Giannis Antetokounmpo, game time decisions in this game. I wonder what Giannis is suffering from. Let's have a quick look. Giannis. He's got left Achilles injury. My God. If you're a game time decision with a left Achilles problem, would you really play? Let's see. So Giannis's points prop, 30.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. The matchup against the Warriors is a somewhat difficult one. Looking at his head-to-head records, 30 points and then 33 against the Warriors in his last 2. His assist prop, line's at 6.5, 4 out of his last 10. The matchup is good, but he's gone under his assist prop both times against them. And his rebound prop, 5 out of his last 10 games he's gone over, and 1 of 2 against the Warriors. So, yeah, look, I think if I'm looking at Giannis, I'm probably most of the time looking at it under in his PRA, but his last game was great. His matchup isn't too bad for rebounds and assists. His just forms a little bit all over the place. If you look at rebounds and assists, he does have a good matchup. 4 out of his last 10, but he did go under in his last 2 games against the Warriors. And if he's coming to the game into the injury, I wouldn't feel confident betting on him anyway. Let's have a look at Dame. So Dame got a bit of a rivalry with Steph Curry. I know he definitely gets up for these games, but let's check him out. Points line's 25.5. The matchup is good, and he's only covered this in 2 out of his last 10 games. Against the Warriors, scored 27 points the last time these guys met in January. So I do like the over in his points, especially if Giannis is not there. Dame has a better matchup than Giannis does. Giannis, obviously the first option, but the Warriors will do what they can to slow him down. But looking at Dame's assists, the line's at 6.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10, but he also covered this in that last game against the Warriors. Plus 100 play there too, so I don't mind the odds for that. And the matchup for assists is pretty good for Dame. Jumping into his 3-point prop, that line is 2.5. Dame is back. It's minus 145 though, so that could make the part of this though. We're looking at some parlays. Dame 3-pointers. I'll check that one out. But yeah, he's covered in 5 consecutive games. The matchup is a good one against the Warriors. I think he's going to let it fly. Last time they matched up though, he only made 2 3-pointers, 2 from 5. We look at his last 5 games. What are we seeing? We're seeing an average of 8.4 attempts, and he's averaging 3.6 makes. You only need 3 in this game, so he's covered that in 5 straight. That's an interesting one. So I do like Dame in this one. I like him even more if Giannis doesn't play, but maybe a Dame points plus assists. I could get behind that too. Jumping over to the Warriors, let's have a look at Steph Curry. Last time we bet on Steph Curry, we went 0 for 9 from downtown against Boston. I remember that. Scored 4 points. Mine's at 26.5. He's covered in 3 of his last 10. The Bucks on the season are an easy matchup for point guards, but since Doc Rivers is there, it's starting to get a little bit better. Head-to-head matchup, Steph Curry scored 36 points the last time these guys met. His assist props at 4.5. He's covered in 7 of his last 10. Matchup is difficult, and he went under the last time they played. Looking at his 3-point line, it's at 5.5. He's covered that in 5 of his last 10. Tough matchup, but did have 6 3-pointers made the last time he versed the Bucks. So, yeah, I'm not feeling Steph Curry in this one, but yeah, I know a lot of people will be considering betting on him. Looking at the cum bucket here, Jonathan Kuminga was on a great run, ran into the Boston juggernaut and struggled, but who didn't from this team? 4 of his last 10. He's got a difficult matchup. He's gone over in his last 2 games against the Bucks, 19 and 28 points. So that's somewhat promising for Kuminga fans out there. Assist prop, 2.5. I have gotten caught betting this. I think it was against the Knicks. Yep, he had 2 assists in that game, so that sucked. He's got a tough matchup here, so I wouldn't take that. You can get Kuminga for plus money for 1 3-pointer. He has hit a lot of he has hit threes against the Bucks though. Check that out. 3 and 2 in his last 2 games, off an average of 4 attempts. Could be getting lucky. Looking at his last 10, he's averaging 1.3 attempts per game. So, yeah, makes sense for it to be plus money, right? His rebound prop, 5.5. He's covered in 6 of his last 10. Tough matchup against the Bucks, and he's gone under in his last 2 against them. So, if you're betting on Jonathan Kuminga, I'd say probably his points prop, but outside of that, not overly confident. Who else is there in this game? Andrew Wiggins. Looks like he's been playing well over his last 5. His points prop, 12.5. He has covered in 4 straight, which is good. Matchup, not an easy one. Against the Bucks, he scored 7 points the last time they played. Assist is at 1.5. He's covered that quite well, 7 of his last 10, and the matchup's not too bad, but only 1 assist last time against the Bucks. Wonder what his 3-point prop is. 1.5 plus money. He's hit in 6 consecutive games. The matchup is difficult. Only had 1 3-pointer the last time they played. But looking at this 6-game stretch here, what's been happening? Well, let's check his last 5. Last 5, he's covered it in all. He's playing about 29 minutes. He's taking 4.6 3-pointers per game, and he's shooting them at 50%. On the season, he's shooting 3-pointers at 33%. So over his last 5 games, we're definitely seeing an uplift in his percentages. But look, you only need 2 3-pointers. He's probably going to take 4 to 5 of them. I don't mind that, but you're making bets based off mathematics, really. So, yeah, not really feeling it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he hits it. Well, we're doing very well for time here. I think I'll get this done in an hour. Let's see. Jumping into the last game, it's the Sacramento Kings versus the Los Angeles Lakers. In this one, who do you guess? LeBron James, Anthony Davis, game time decisions once again. For the Sacramento Kings, it looks like De'Aaron Fox is good to go. Sabonis is in. That's all that really matters. Let's go through these Sacramento Kings firstly. And we'll start with, Jesus Christ, there's so much purple here. Getting bloody, my eyes are getting blurry. Start with De'Aaron Fox. His points prop is 25.5. The matchup with the Lakers is not a difficult one. He has covered in 5 of his last 10. Only scored 20 points against the Bulls, but that was a difficult matchup. Head-to-head, he's given it to the Lakers, going over in 5 out of his last 6. His assist prop, the numbers are quite strong there. Check that out. 8 of his last 10 games, he's gone over his 5.5 assist prop. The matchup isn't a difficult one, but it's not an easy one either. But he's got it done against the Lakers. 5 out of his last 6. So, for De'Aaron Fox, I'd be taking his points plus assists. 31.5. I get that he's covered in 5 of his last 10. but his head-to-head matchups against the Lakers, 5 out of his last 6, and it really does cover in case he does explode on the assist front, or if it really is in points. He could cover this in points alone. He's done it a few times already in his most recent games. And against the Lakers, he's covered this in points alone in 3 out of his last 4 games. So De'Aaron Fox, points plus assists, I don't mind that. So let me make a short list. D Fox. Pointers, I'd be curious to see what that's at. Line's at 2.5. Plus money. He's only hitting 2 of his last 10 and only 2 of his last 6 against the Lakers. So I think he'd be attacking the rack in this one. Who else is there? Domantas Sabonis up against AD in this one. That should be an interesting clash. Points prop is at 20.5. The matchup's not a bad one, but it's not a great one either. 4 of his last 10 and 3 out of his last 5 against the Lakers. Somewhat inconsistent. His assist props at 7.5. Does have a good matchup here. Covered in 7 out of his last 10 games. Against the Lakers, though, he's only covered in 1 of 5. His rebound prop, 13.5. 6 out of his last 10. Had 21 rebounds against the Bulls. Has a good matchup here against the Lakers. And he's hit that in 3 out of his last 5. He's actually covered this in his last 2 games against the Los Angeles Lakers. Both of these games were this season. 15 and 16 boards. 1 at home and 1 on the road. Kings on the road in this one. So I don't mind this for Domantas Sabonis. It's just a really high number, 13.5. I feel like if he does hit it, you'd be waiting till the very end of the game. That's going to be a very sweaty bet, that one. But I do think he goes over. Just may not be an enjoyable one to play. On the road, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, and Kevin Huerter. None of these guys really interesting me, but at the same time, Kevin Huerter, he's performed well against the Lakers in the past. So we'll just check his points and 3-point props. Line at 10.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. It's the Lakers, though. Check this out. 6 consecutive games. Kevin Huerter has absolutely torched these guys. Looking at his 3-point prop at 1.5, he's covered it in 6 straight games against the Lakers, and he's covered it in 8 out of his last 10. Kevin Huerter, that's him. Let's have a look at Harrison Barnes, because I know he's played well against the Lakers too. In his last 10, 4 of his last 10. But against the Lakers, 5 out of his last 6, he's covered this line. Looking at his 3 prop, it's 1.5, 4 of his last 6 against the Lakers, and 5 out of his last 10 overall. So just wanted to check those guys real quick because I knew the Lakers form was good. Recent form, a little bit all over the place. Looking at the Los Angeles Lakers, and if you like recent form, you're going to like D'Angelo Russell because recently everybody's been betting on him, waiting for him to fail, and he does not. His points prop at 17.5. He's covered in 8 of his last 10 games. Against the Kings, scored 28 points in the last matchup, 17 points in the one prior. So D'Lo, the matchup's not an awful one either. He's been playing very good. Can't take that from him. His assist props at 5.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. Obviously, his high scoring games, not getting too many assists, but he's covered this in 1 of his last 2. So for D'Lo, let's have a look at his 3-point prop real quick. He's covered that in 8 of his last 10, 1 of 2 against the Kings. I wouldn't be taking his 3-point prop. What I would be taking, if I had to take one, would be his points plus assist prop. So he's covered this in 9 of his last 10. 17 of his last 20, not a difficult one. 23.5 for D'Lo. Points plus assists. So I've actually got a lot of players for points plus assists. I don't mind this. I might be onto something. Next minute, get them all wrong. D'Lo, points plus assists. I don't mind that. Rui, over his last 10 games, he's covered 12.5 points 7 times. So I can't ignore that, right? So check him out. 7 out of his last 10. Matchup is a difficult one against the Kings, though. Kings are the 8th fewest points to small forwards on the season, but Rui over his last 10, since he's joined the starting lineup, he has had some good games, but I think there are better players with better matchups. Let's look at Austin Reeves. Now, he's had a difficult time against the Kings in the past, I believe. 14.5 is his points prop. The matchup isn't too bad. 6 out of his last 10. Kings, 1 of his last 3. He went under in 2 straight games. Austin Reeves is at 5.5. Last 2 games he's been pinging, but 5 of his last 10, and against the Kings, 1 of his last 3. So Austin Reeves, I wouldn't say he's in bad form. He's just very consistent. So a very tough player to bet on. LeBron James, my God, what can't this man do? probably win another championship. But his points prop 25.5. He's got a great matchup against the Kings. He's covered in 6 of his last 10, and he's covered in every single game against the Kings. Look at that, 5 from 5. LeBron James has got it done. Part of the reason of this is the pace. The Lakers play with the 5th highest pace in the league, despite this guy being 105 years old, and the Kings playing with the 12th highest pace. So there's going to be a lot of action, and I think a lot of easy points. LeBron's covered this quite well against them. 6 out of his last 10. So even if you wanted to buy a point, 24.5, that changes this to 8 out of his last 10 games he's covered. And obviously you can fall on the back of LeBron James covering every single game against the Kings. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 8.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. He's covered in 3 of his last 5, but he's been very close a lot of these games. So definitely getting after it on the assist side of the ball. And his rebound prop, that has been down. A little bit inconsistent. His line's at 7.5. It's plus money. The matchup, not an easy one, but not a hard one. But 2 out of his last 10, but he has rebounded well against the Kings in the past. So the difference is LeBron James getting like a lot older very quickly. So the way he's rebounding this year is not the way that he was rebounding last year. So I don't like his rebounds, but shit, I'm going to say it again. Points plus assists. Could this be the play here? Looking at 34.5 points plus assists, 8 of his last 20, 6 out of his last 10, and he covered in every single game against the Kings. But yeah, it is a high one. I do like the D'Lo one a lot better. If I had to pick one for LeBron, it'd probably just be his points. But looking his, yeah, man, let me know. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. I'll hold back from betting on LeBron James. Actually, I've got his 3-point prop. That's been pretty decent. It's still at 1.5, but the odds suck. Odds suck, minus 160. Bron's covered it in 3 of his last 5 against the Kings. I think he covers at 1.5, but for those odds, it's not worth it. Where's Anthony Davis? He's been pretty good this year, actually. I wouldn't say he's very good, but he's been playing, which is an improvement. His line's at 25.5. Tough matchup against the Kings. He's covered in 1 of his last 3 games against them. His assist prop at 2.5. 4 of his last 10. 1 of his last 3 against the Kings. He has been rebounding quite well, so his line's at 13.5. The matchup's not too bad there. 5 out of his last 10, and he's covered in 2 out of his last 3 against the Sacramento Kings. Only had 9 rebounds the last time they played, though. So, yeah, maybe if we'd had some alternate lines here for Anthony Davis, probably feel a bit more comfortable taking him at 12 rebounds, possibly 10, but then you're not going to get great odds. So, yeah, I'm not really feeling AD in this one. I think LeBron, obviously his numbers are great, but De'Aaron Fox, D'Lo, their points and assists, they've really got me interested. But look, I haven't made my mind up yet. I'm obviously still going to get back into the lab. I'm going to start editing. I'm going to get this uploaded. Whilst that's all happening, I'll be researching my bets. And then hopefully in the pinned comment within the next hour, I'll have all my bets. You guys have been great in the comment section, though. A lot of positive feedback, and a lot of you guys keep coming back for more. A lot of repeat viewers just letting me know that you guys appreciate me, and that honestly does mean a lot. A lot of new subscribers continue to join. I think we're almost at 4,100 already. A lot of new guys, not only just subscribing, but letting me know that you have. I know a lot of you guys ask, not a lot, but there's a few of you who ask me to bet more unders. Now, I show you all the numbers anyway, and I tell you which ones I'd consider taking for an under. What I really encourage you to do is do your own research and decide whether you're going to play the under yourself. Now, I personally don't like playing unders, not because they don't win. It's just the experience is not great, right? Obviously, people's points, rebounds, and assists, they go up throughout the game. And if you're betting on them to go under, it's an uncomfortable bet to play. Unless I believe someone's going to be absolutely terrible, I'd take it. But again, it's not fun, but I know what you guys are coming from. It's fun when you're right. It's fun when you're winning, and that is also true. So look, I'll consider it. I've got a lot of players that I need to look through. But ultimately, I do all this to give you all the numbers, right? Giving you all the numbers, doing the research, some of the analytics, showing you the tool that you could use and get a free trial on so you can do your own research. I honestly think the best thing for you guys to do is to figure it out yourself. You know I'm going to do these videos, right? I'll do the videos. I'll share my insights. I'll share all my bets, but I'm telling you the best thing to do is learn how to figure it out yourself. Like even right now, I'm not in the best of form. in terms of making my picks. I'm not far off. I'm very close with a lot of them, which is quite frustrating. But I need to refine my strategy. There is something that I'm missing, or there is something that I'm not considering, or maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I'm burnt out. Maybe it's too late. Like it's almost 12 o'clock at night. I get up at 6 a.m. every single day. I work 9 to 10 hours. I've got a young child, another one on the way. I'm committed to my family. So maybe I'm just tired and I'm making stupid decisions by the time I place the bets. I do not know. But what I'm saying is, check out Outlier or any other tool, or you can use ESPN. There's a lot of free stats available, StatsMuse. Do some research and make your own decisions. And I promise you, over time, you are going to get better at it and you will thank me later. But look, if you're interested in finding more about sports betting, I do have a lot of other videos. It's just not daily picks. So please check those suckers out. Best of luck. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice and the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.